It's time for Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Stay tuned for insights, impact, and inspiration right here on Channel Africa. Available on the Channel Africa app. Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m.
And it is exactly 2100 hours Central African time. A very good evening to you. Warm welcome. This is Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective, live from our headquarters here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, bringing you the very latest news and current affairs developments in and around your world, wherever you're listening from. We'll talk about attacks in Nigeria regarding Boko Haram and the pervasive activity in one of the Nigerian states. We'll also tell you about Venezuela, its road to transition. Where exactly is it after US President Donald Trump and his forces invaded the country and forcibly removed its president and his wife? And we'll also talk about the creative economy in our 2140 feature today. All that and more coming up. Let's first start with your top stories this hour.
1 hour, one continent, one voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
And our top story this hour, the United Nations Migration Agency says 53 people have died or are missing after the rubber boat they were traveling in capsized off the coast of Libya last week. Libya has in recent years emerged as the dominant transit point for migrants fleeing war and poverty in Africa and the Middle East. The BBC's Imogen Folks has those details.
The rubber boat, packed with 55 people, among them mothers with children, left Libya on February 5th. Hours into its voyage, it apparently took on water and capsized. By the time a Libyan search and rescue team arrived, just 2 people, both women from Nigeria, were found alive. One told rescuers she had lost her 2 babies, the other her husband. The latest loss of life in the Mediterranean brings the number of recorded dead or missing to almost 500 this year alone.
Jihadist groups are increasingly carrying out drone strikes in West Africa, raising alarms that they are building the capacity to wage war from the skies. The leading violence monitoring organization, ACLED, has recorded at least 69 drone strikes by an Al-Qaeda affiliate in Burkina Faso and Mali since 2023, while 2 Islamic State affiliates have carried out around 20, mostly in Nigeria, which has been battling numerous insurgent groups for almost 25 years. Elizabeth Mapari has more.
The latest drone attack took place in Nigeria's northeastern Borno state on the 29th of January when jihadists carried out a 2-pronged assault with multiple armed drones and ground fighters on a military base. According to SAWAT, ISWAP has carried out 10 drone strikes since 2024 in northeastern Nigeria, as well as in northern Cameroon, southern Niger and southern Chad, all countries affected by the insurgency in Nigeria. The jihadist group that has used drones the most is the Al-Qaeda-affiliated JNIM, which claims to have carried out 69 strikes in neighboring Mali and Burkina Faso and 1 across the border in Togo.
Nigerian lawmakers are expected to this week debate legislation that would make electronic transmission of election results mandatory. Protesters gathered in Nigeria's capital Abuja today to pressure the Senate to pass amendments to the country's electoral law. Demonstrators carried placards reading "Electoral Reform Now" and "Pass the Electoral Act Bill Now." Former presidential candidate Peter Obi joined the protest. He says Nigerians want an electoral process that is transparent from beginning to end.
What we want is an electoral process that is transparent from beginning to finish. The election must be transmitted electronically from the polling booth direct.
The 48th Ordinary Session of the African Union Executive Council is set to take place from Wednesday. The annual gathering will be held in the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa and will look into pressing issues affecting the continent. The SABC's Kylie Kumalo has more.
The African Union's Executive Council will focus on a number of critical issues facing the African continent. They will look at the AU's participation in the G20 in the United States, consider the reports of the 51st Ordinary Session of Permanent Representatives Committee, and conduct elections and appointments to AU organs and institutions. They will further consider draft legal instruments and institutional governance matters.
Global food prices have dropped for the fifth month in a row, driven by record harvests and rising stockpiles. This easing is helping to stabilize international markets, but many African countries continue to struggle with high food costs, partly due to import dependencies and local supply challenges. Rising rice and vegetable oil prices also highlight that not all staples are becoming cheaper. Leader of the Food and Agricultural Organization's Price Index team in Rome, Monica Toholtotova, elaborates.
So what we are looking at, or what we are keeping in the back of our minds when we are analyzing the food commodity markets is there going to be some sort of a shock? Now, shocks can come in many shapes and forms. One of them, for example, the most frequent one, is a weather-related shock. For now, which would then impact the amount of staples that is being produced.
And finally, the White House has revealed the key members of the body that will supervise the next phase of the peace process in Gaza. The executive of what US President Donald Trump has called the Board of Peace includes his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. The BBC's David Willis has more.
The members of the Board of Peace will oversee the second phase of Donald Trump's plan to end the conflict in Gaza. On their shoulders will rest responsibility for maintaining a fragile truce and the reconstruction of a territory all but lain to waste by more than 2 years of war. Adding to the gargantuan challenge of rebuilding one of the most densely populated places on Earth are routine violations of the current ceasefire agreement and Hamas's refusal to publicly commit to a full disarmament in Gaza.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa. And just a reminder that we are streaming live on Facebook as well as YouTube at Channel Africa 1 is where you'll find us, and we are also on Instagram and TikTok on the same moniker at Channel Africa 1. And remember that you can share your thoughts on the perspectives that we're sharing with you. Tell us what conversations are happening in your world. +27 63 406 9126. That's a hotline number that you can share your thoughts on. Moving to West Africa now, with a community of 2 villages in Nigeria's western state of Kwara have continued to search for the remains of the victims of last week's deadly attack by militant group Boko Haram. The Nigerian branch of the Red Cross aid organization says more than 160 people were killed during a ferocious shooting attack on the rural communities of Woro and Nuku. Shops were reportedly looted, homes were razed, and dozens of women and children remain missing. As locals say, they suspect that they've been abducted into surrounding forests. For more on the security situation in the area, we are joined now by Criminology and Security Studies lecturer at Caleb University in Lagos, Nigeria, Dr. Diyeli Aibe. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. Dr. Aibe, are you with us? Okay, we're going to see if we can reconnect with Dr. Aibe. Look at that situation in Nigeria. We're going to take a quick break.
Got something to say? Are you passionate about issues that
Yes,
matter?
I'm hearing
Do you have a
clearly now.
voice that deserves to be
Yes,
heard?
I'm
Well,
Yes,
we've
it's on.
got the perfect platform for you. Call in or drop us a WhatsApp on +27 63 406 9126. And we will call you back so you could have your say and be part of the conversation.
30 years of age. I just turned 30 on the 15th of November. So yeah, that's who I am, you know.
It's not just talk, it's your chance to air your views, share your opinion, engage with the community that values your perspective. Follow us on our social media. Visit our website at www.channelafrica.co.za and get ready to share your views on Channel Africa, the African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Congolese President Felix Tshisekedi has now accused Rwanda of violating the peace deal. Are you surprised at this latest accusation? This is literally days after a signing a ceremony, so to speak.
This is not surprising. I mean, if you ask Paul Kagame, he would also say almost the same thing. One should ask a question. The broker of the peace deal, President Trump, what is it that he wants? Why now? And why is this peace deal being signed in the Americas and not in the Great Lakes? Paul Kagame has never respected Tshisekedi, as often say. Tshisekedi must deal with the problems in his country. He has nothing to do with it. So this peace deal, obviously, when it was signed, one just looked at it and said, this will not last.
Kenny Matiba, former journalist.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
At 11 minutes past 9, we'll go back to Nigeria. Let's first take you to the 2026 Mining Indaba, which gets underway in Cape Town, South Africa. The event is one of the continent's most influential gatherings of industry leaders, policymakers and investors. It takes place against a backdrop of rising demand for energy transition minerals, growing calls for sustainable and inclusive mining, and the push to add greater value on the continent. Delegates are discussing how Africa can leverage its vast resources for long-term economic transformation. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Simosa is in Cape Town.
This year's discussions come at a critical moment for the continent as Africa positions itself as a key supplier of minerals needed for the global energy transition, while also pushing for greater local value addition and policy certainty. South Africa's Minister of Mineral Resources and Petroleum, Gwede Mantashe, underscored the importance of policy coordination.
We need to talk on export earnings. We need to talk about it in terms of its contribution to development in the continent.
In his keynote address, Zambian President Hakainde Hichilema says every mineral on the continent is critical.
Every metal, every resource is a critical resource. It's true. Every dining time in your house, you cut that. It's minerals. Switch on the light in your house. Ordinary conduct, daily life. It's minerals. It's copper. It's other things.
The president says there's more strength in collaboration.
And I want to commend South Africa, Minister Mantashe, for your leadership in driving continental collaboration. I was listening very carefully to the panelists here, to the things that panelists had to say. It is true that Africa must collaborate. Yes, individual national interest is only logical.
Meanwhile, Zambia wants to ramp up copper production. I had a chat with Helen Lubamba, Stanbic Bank Zambia's head of corporate and investment bankings, to look at the biggest financing gaps holding the sector back.
There are quite a number of issues, but the ones that would be absolutely pertinent to the Zambia situation and most countries around the world would be to do with the fact that we're dealing with a commodity that requires long-term investment, and a commodity that's also susceptible to market prices and demand globally. So what you need in a scenario like that is, where can you find the investment opportunities where you've got a stable investing climate, stable policy, because the one thing you can't control is the commodity price. So one of the things that does hold back investments is what the kind of policy landscape you're dealing with in the region that you're operating in.
How critical is policy stability in attracting long-term mining investment into Zambia?
I think we've all accepted that there is a perception premium that adds to the cost of funding on the continent, and I think it's becoming a very, very pertinent subject right now. And I know it is spoken about by a lot of business leaders, including our own group, Standard Bank Group leader, who has spoken and is very passionate about trying to address that perception premium that is impacting the cost of funding and the perceived risk of investment on the continent. If I speak about Zambia, over the last number of years, there've been quite a number of issues that have impacted the investment environment, particularly in the mining sector.
With high-level talks continuing over the next few days, delegates here will be watching closely to see whether policy promises translate into concrete investment commitments. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa at the 2026 Mining Indaba in Cape Town, South Africa.
16 minutes past 9, let's take you back to Nigeria, where two villagers in the western state of Kwara continue to search for the remains of victims of last week's deadly attack by militant group Boko Haram. The Nigerian branch of the Red Cross Aid Organization says more than 160 people were killed during this ferocious shooting attack on the rural communities of Woro and Nuku, whom were told had their homes razed to the ground, looted, and dozens of women and children are reported still missing. For more on the situation, we're on the line now to Criminology and Security Studies lecturer at Caleb University in Lagos, Nigeria, Dr. Diyeli Agbe. Very good evening to Dr. Agbe. I hope you can hear us now.
Clearly.
Fantastic. So what can you tell us about the latest reports coming out of these two villages, and what has been government's response to this attack?
Yeah, the governor of Kwara State visited the scene. He visited the scene. The governor was traumatized by the core of Abu Karim, the governor of Kwara State himself. I can't precisely get his name now, but he went to the scene of the event, the crime scene with killings at Wuru in Kwara State, and he saw a first-hand experience of what happened until he visited the paramount ruler and some people. Eyewitness gave a narrative. It was so traumatic. It was so traumatic, so emotional. And when I was looking at that, I was moved to tears to see what is happening. It was so sad that this kind of thing is happening at this time. And the government, he now visited the president to brief the president. The president has deployed the military now to that place and to be able to mitigate any escalation. So I wonder, this has been occurring. If you look at during the Jonathan government 2015, there was this the Chibok girls. Then after that, during the Buhari government, there was the Dachi girls adoption. And then the other two. I mean, between the it was the end of last year, presumably there was the killing too of adoption of schools now. So using the children, they killed about more than 200 people in Wuru local government area in Kwara State, and they kidnapped dozens of women and children. Probably from intelligence source I'm getting that they want to use that children and women as a bargaining chips or as a shield in case of any American invasion in those areas. So that's what I use. That is strategy I'm using now, a guerrilla warfare attack, in our military, in order to respond to that swiftly. You can see that it's so disheartening that how did they go through those checkpoints? Nigeria, they had a lot of checkpoints in our Nigerian roads, especially in that region. So how did they able to go? They're not ghosts. How did they disappear? How were they not being surveilled? We talk of use of technology in helping our law enforcement agency to mitigate this, but we've seen the response are very slow. They're dragging in their response. I've said it several times in several platforms that ability to turn attention by the government has been dismal and been lacking, and that's why these insurgency or this Boko Haram people are taking or daring the military, or daring our law enforcement agency. They know nothing will happen to them, and nobody will be prosecuted, nobody will be brought to book, and so it's so saddening And it seems there's an insider threat within the system. Somebody leaked, there was intelligence within them. So you can see the bandits are using intelligence in their operations, and our level agency they're not using the intelligence gathering. They have that synergy. We talk about under the national plan of 2017, or presumably yes, 2017, of strategic communication and use of intelligence collaboration in terms of collating information, in terms of disseminating and gathering information, intelligence.
Let me just stop you there, Dr. Ibe, because you are speaking rather fast, and there's some important points that you raised that I'd like you to expand on a little bit more. You're saying Boko Haram is using intelligence from where, and in what manner are they using this intelligence? How does it aid them?
Yes, because immediately they got to that local government, they asked they called some certain names, and they say, well, we want to go to the head chief, the clan head here, and they directed them, they went straight to that place and started killing. They brought out 2 women. One of the clan head, the 2 of the children have just finished from the medical school, and they shot them in a broad daylight at that time in public view, and they were killed. So how did they know? They just went. So they're working on intelligence. They can't just operate on intelligence. They can't just operate on their operations. They don't want to go and fail. So they're working on intelligence reports with an insider threat. That security analysis, we'll talk about this insider threat. An insider cannot come to an invasion and attack without an insider threat. So they're operating on that intelligence. But it's so disheartening that our law enforcement agents who are supposed to work on that intelligence plant an informant into the segment to give them intelligence to operate. They have not been doing that, and that's why the bandits are catching on this vulnerability in our security agencies or security architecture to cause havoc and mayhem within the people. It's so disheartening. And one of the fundamental functions of any government anywhere was to protect its citizens. And you cannot do that. That state or is tending towards the state. So it's so sad, but the president has reacted swiftly on that. I want to applaud the president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for reacting, but we're always very reactive. We are not proactive. That's one of the things we have made that recommendation. We have to be proactive, not reactive. So the president reacting to this now. So the military, how did they go through those checkpoints, all those villages routine to come to Wuru and attack, and nobody was caught, nobody's arrested? It's still amazing. It's like in a wonderland. Imagine how can happen in Nigeria. With the strength of our military, with the strength of our law enforcement agency, we cannot able to. Nobody was caught, nobody's arrested, nobody's being persecuted, and they're going scot-free, and adopted dozens of children and women, using as a human shield because of any attack, so it's so sad.
And we've been hearing about a lot of these insurgencies and attacks on certain states in Nigeria, whether it be the north. This time we talk about the west, but I want to understand naturally the dynamics, the local dynamics and local resistance may be different. But Inquirer, I want to understand what would be the motive behind it, and are police themselves doing their own intelligence work? Are the security forces, you're saying they're reactive, but do they at least have an arsenal of intelligence that they can use at their disposal, or are they continually lacking in being accountable?
Yes, they have Nigeria have one of the best military or best law enforcement in Africa, or not even the world, but ability to turn those intention into action. It does rhetorics. We're just talking about how to smoke up the insurgency, but it seems the insurgents now, the Boko Haram, the bandits, are being daring, they are audacious in the act, but the military has that firepower to do that. But nobody reluctancy or probably dragging or not being able to turn intention to action has been lacking. It's threatening our national security, and we are being besieged by bandits now, and we're turning towards in failed state, if not probably nip it to the bud. It is a looming national chaos of immense proportion if we don't nip this as swiftly as possible. We're turning towards election 2027. It will create fears in the mind of Nigerians to go out and vote, and you want Nigerians to come and vote massively, So it's creating fears in Nigerians will be reluctant to do that, and the election will not be credible because majority of Nigerians don't want to come out to risk their life because they know the law enforcement are not there to protect them in terms of if they want to come out to vote. So it's so sad. We have said that we need to have reactive law enforcement agency, not a proactive law enforcement agency, not reactive. Rather, we're always reactive when the thing has happened and nobody's been caught, nobody's been arrested, nobody's been persecuted. So we're still becoming a current occasion, becoming too frequent now, and becoming as if the government is just there. It's not visible. It's just an abstract government.
So let's understand this. President Tinubu has blamed Boko Haram for this attack, but we understand that some local officials are saying it's the Lakurawa group. And I want to understand, is there a sense that some of these armed insurgents are operating in the vicinity, in the area, like ISIL, or have they moved away from what is understood to be their traditional stronghold, which is in the northeast?
Yeah, they're spreading. The military tend to smoke them out in the northeast, in Boko Haram, in those areas, and they're spreading now. They're diverting to other sources of income, to banditry, especially to other part of the region, because of that attack of the American, that December Christmas attack from America. So creating fear. So they're spreading, to other territories where they can, use soft targets as a shield, or to probably create fear in the mind of the people. So that is part of the ISIS, the book of the Boko Haram. Before the president coming out to make that, there were gotten some intelligence reports. People cannot just allege when he doesn't know. So the security chief would have briefed him from the mode of operandi or signatory of the attack, to discover that it's definitely been the Boko Haram insurgency or IS affiliation of IS, trying to get that support from. So the mode of operandi is still like trying to create fear in the mind, just like the Taliban in Afghanistan, using the fear for using force to create fear in the minds of people. That's the same narrative they're trying to. And so disheartening. Nigeria is even a polarized country. People are really meaning to it now. Reading to us, it was creating insecurity in the hands of the people to discredit the government, that the government is not capable of enough to protect lives and property of Nigerians. Okay. And that's what I hope the opposition will not keen to this now, to send the narrative to the populace that the government is weak and vulnerable.
I do need to ask this question again, because we are running out of time. I did ask about the motive behind it. You speak about what has happened in Afghanistan and other areas, but in this case, is it about religious indoctrination? And if so, wouldn't also it be puzzling, given the fact that we understand that the United States has sent a group of advisory officials just to help combat this, and this is the same United States that has accused Nigeria of allowing for the persecution of Christians. So how does the government rationalize that, and having a partner that accuses it of this? And it doesn't mean that it has a case to answer, the government of Nigeria.
Well, the government is trying to be playing politics, trying to mitigate it, not to create impression that they're not able to protect the citizen. And they're trying to convince the American government that, we can work, collaborate together, don't accuse of anything. We're trying to solve it, but we can see that, so the Nigerian government is trying to be careful not to offend the Americans. Donald Trump has a way of doing things, we can probably, and create a weakness. Nigeria is one of the biggest giants of Africa, so they don't want to be in the back boots of the American president, Donald Trump, is capable of doing anything. So they're trying to know, okay, we can form as an alliance to solve this problem, not attack us or accuse us, and so American is seeing that this Christmas attack has triggered has angered the insurgents. Okay, you're trying to dare us, so it's not being careful, you can speed into something else. And that a conflict that cannot be controlled. So we need to probably the government need to be careful how to talk about strategic communication, able to communicate it effectively to Nigerians, and able to not to offend the Americans too, to work together, form that synergy, so that we can form that interagency collaboration and adopt a strategic communication so we do not escalate this. And we're getting towards election 2027. We want to vote as Nigerians, and we don't want to vote in fear or in panic. So
right. The government. Dr. Dieli, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm afraid we have run out of time. Dr. Dieli Agbe is a chronology and security studies lecturer at Caleb University in Lagos.
Let's just do it.
Your life just got easier. Get the Channel Africa app and take us wherever you go. Catch the latest news, enjoy your favorite shows, stream the music you love, and stay connected to the continent. All in one spot, right in your pocket. Simple, quick, and always with you. The Channel Africa app. Download it now on iOS and Android.
The whole population of Africa has been shocked to the depth of its soul.
For 60 years, Channel Africa has been the voice that connects the continent, telling our stories and sharing our vision with the world. This year, we mark 6 decades of broadcast excellence.
60 years of stories, sound, and connection.
6 years of African conversations that matter.
This is 60 years of broadcast excellence.
Rooted in Africa's heartbeat and looking boldly into the future. Join Channel Africa as we celebrate 60 years of broadcasting. Still strong, still vibrant, and still giving you the African perspective.
Channel Africa.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa. And it is now exactly 30 minutes after 9. It's been 5 weeks since the world watched the forced removal of Nicolas Maduro and his wife, yet the promise of a peaceful democratic transition in Venezuela is already facing a severe litmus test. Just days ago, the arrest of the high-profile opposition figure Juanipa, reportedly seized by intelligence agents, sent shockwaves through a nation already on edge. For many, this arrest signals that the machinery of repression, as Amnesty International warns about, is still very much in motion, even under the new interim internship. For more on this, we're joined by Amnesty International's America's Deputy Director for Research, Valentina Ballesta. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Hi, thank you, and hello to your audience as well.
So how does Amnesty frame what has just happened?
Well, we have called this an act of aggression by the U.S., meaning that the incursion of military operation from a foreign country into Venezuela breaches international law. However, our main concern right now remains in a human rights situation in Venezuela, the policy of repression that is still in place there, and how even what happened with the U.S. May not relieve at all the human rights situation on the ground, but the opposite, that it would create all this fear and this uncertainty around the next steps, and that repression still takes place, meaning arbitrary detentions, enforced disappearances, and torture that we have documented for the last 6 to 7 years.
And one would say this is quite a twist, the fact that Maria Machado is saying that her opposition colleague, that is Juan Pablo Juanipa, has been kidnapped, given the fact that from the world's eyes, she's been set up to take over from Nicolas Maduro and is supposed to do the bidding of the United States. So what are your thoughts about this?
Well, we've been seeing, first of all, Juanipa, this political leader, he was actually released 2 days ago by the government because he was under their custody, under an arbitrary detention, politically motivated arbitrary detention. And I think it was not more than 24 or 48 hours after he's released, he was again re-arrested, let's say. And the Attorney General's office has issued a press release saying that he has allegedly breached the conditions under which he was put into freedom, let's say. However, what we are seeing as Amnesty International, and this is our main call right now, is that the apparatus of repression is still in place. Therefore, whatever or whomever is freed is going to be subject to the same arbitrariness as they were subjected in the first time when they were arrested. So until we don't see specific guarantees of non-repetition is going to be very hard to call or to assess the situation in Venezuela as one in which human rights are guaranteed and respected.
And the fact that you have these arrests and releases and re-detention, what does it speak to, given the fact that Maduro was removed forcibly and it was under the guise of seeking a transition? But what does it say if the security forces there are also committing the same arbitrary detentions and remote tortures? And I want to also understand the understanding of Venezuela's global legitimacy and how is it shaping domestic reconciliation with these kind of events continuing.
Yeah, precisely. That's exactly the point. What has happened in Venezuela is the removal of a person who was in the government. However, the whole apparatus around him, the vice president, who is now president in charge of Venezuela, and the security forces and the Ministry of Interior, they are all still in power. And that the government of Nicolas Maduro will drastically change only by removing the head of the government, it is at least to say naive, because right now what we are seeing is well, there's still many things to see on how they will reaccommodate in this to trying to withhold power, let's say, but the main individuals who are still in power were in power before, and were the ones taking also the decisions on whether and whom were going to be detained, arrested, tortured, etc. So right now it is too soon to believe that this will end in a beneficial or a happy ending for the Venezuelans.
And what mechanisms exist, not only for monitoring internally and externally, if and I'm also keen to understand your understanding of the composition of Venezuela's government at the moment. Do you have an even mix of hardliners and reformers? And how is this going to be possible, just in terms of turning around what critics of Venezuela, who said that it was an illegitimate government, to something that can be legitimate?
Yeah, well, it is, they have, in the government of Venezuela right now, they have presented themselves as a unity of power, and there are some signs whether that there are some initiatives, whether this comes after the U.S. pressure over Venezuelan government, or I don't know, to try to transition to something different. However, what we have seen, for example, is the release of arbitrary detentions, as I said before, but then all these comes and forth. It is a very complicated situation at the moment, knowing exactly where this is going to end. However, what we have seen in the past is that the government and the people who are still there has been very very effective, although that's an awful word to use in this context, to silence any form of dissent that does not comply with the plan that they have. So it is hard for human rights groups to see whether this is going to end differently this time.
And I want to talk about there obviously has been widespread criticism of what has been noted as flouting international rules-based order. Now, the role of the diaspora, Venezuelan diaspora, in shaping the future of Venezuela, those who are influential figures, say, in Canada's oil sector and other regional entities or in other countries, what is their role or influence on shaping bilateral relations or foreign policy interests in Venezuela at the moment?
Well, there's a huge diaspora, as you mentioned, of Venezuelans. Right now, we are talking about 1/3 of the country that has fled Venezuela in looking for international protection, and 1/3 of Venezuelans not being all of them politicians, obviously. So, and however, what's happening right now is that many of them want to return to the country or aspire or aim to return to the country. However, as I was saying before, it is very difficult right now to see whether the repression is receding or whether they are still going after anyone who is perceived as critics. And also the economic and social circumstances and the complex humanitarian emergency that Venezuela has been immersed in the past, almost 10 years is also one important issue that is still playing a role, whether Venezuelans go back to the country or not. However, I will make a point here in how the multilateralism right now needs to play an important role. We have been, as Amnesty International, we have been calling for a mandate, a specific mandate of the fact-finding mission of the Human Rights Council, and they have been doing an amazing job documenting human rights violations and crimes against humanity happening in the country. And this is now the time for these multilateralisms to react, like to put their eyes and their oversight over Venezuela, because right now is the most important moment for justice and for victims to receive any sort of redress and guarantees of non-repetition.
Valentina, we really thank you for taking the time to speak to us and just sharing your thoughts as Amnesty International. Amnesty International's America's Deputy Director for Research, Valentina Ballesta, just speaking to us about what is happening in Venezuela now, the past couple of months, what will happen the next 6 months or 12, to just get a sense of whether or not Venezuela is moving towards consolidating democracy, or whether it's backsliding to repression, as some have said, even given the so-called emergency action taken by the United States by removing President Nicolas Maduro. It brings the time to 18 minutes to 10.
Let's just do it.
Your life just got easier. Get the Channel Africa app and take us wherever you go. Catch the latest news, enjoy your favorite shows, stream the music you love, and stay connected to the continent. All in one spot, right in your pocket. Simple, quick, and always with you. The Channel Africa app. Download it now on iOS and Android. Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for Hard Talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla. Channel Africa.
And that brings the time to 16 minutes to 10. You are listening to Africa World Hour, watching Africa World Hour here on Channel Africa, the African Perspective. Time now for our 2140 feature. We talk about the creative heartbeat of the South African city of Johannesburg. It's set to host one of the continent's most transformative gatherings, Umuzi 2026, the African Leadership Academy's annual festival that has become a premier stage for the next generation of African creative leaders. Under the theme of Sankofa, a new genesis, young people from across the continent will make a powerful call to reach back into our collective histories to inform a bold and innovative future. Whether it's through digital design, performance, or visual arts, Umuzi 2026 is asking, how do our roots shape our next beginning? And joining us to tell us all about that is Head of Creative Arts and Events at the African Leadership Academy and Umuzi Youth Pan-African Creative Festival founder, Sanyu Sematimba. She's in the studio. Thank you for making the trip. We really appreciate it. We don't get a lot of visitors.
Thank you so much for having me. Really, really thank you.
So this is the how many years? I'm trying to say it in English that makes sense. It's the iteration number what, Sanyu?
It's the third iteration.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
all right,
yes.
so tell us about the founding of it. And I know this is something that you're very passionate about, so just tell us a little bit more about it, how it began and where is it now?
Okay, so as mentioned, I work at the African Leadership Academy, and I think I'd like to give context of who I am first. So I am a creative by profession, and I've always felt that Africans need a platform to be able to showcase their work or just have a home, you know. What are other creatives doing? Can I speak to other creatives? Can we get influence from each other? Can we talk about the struggles? How can we get uplifted?
Let me just stop you right there, Sanyu, and I want to get your sense of your understanding of what is a creative, and you know, is it homogeneous to what a lot of us think is a creative? Because as the world grows and expands, I think there's just so many points of views about what is a creative.
To me, a creative is someone that creates, right? If you are innovating, if you're making something that's new, you are a creative. So you don't necessarily have to be a singer or an actor. You could be somebody that works in the business of the arts. You could look at product design. Those are creative. So I think it just depends. Being a creative is very, very vast. It's not limited to one specific practice. So that's for me what a creative is.
All right. So you were telling us about the journey to Umuzi.
Yes. So we host an event called Umuzi, and what we identified was that there are a lot of African creatives all over the continent and in their diaspora, but what we don't have is a home. So Umuzi means your home. And you know, when you go home after the holidays, after school, you rest, you sleep, you eat food, you're excited, your family talks to you, and then they feed you, and then you're ready for the year, and then they send you out and you go out and you do great things, right? So what we realized was that young creatives actually don't have that space, a space where they can come together, where they can network, where they can be fed as in spiritually, mentally as well, just community-wise as well, speaking about what's happening in their creative practices. They don't really have that. Young creatives don't have a space like that. So Umuzi basically became a home for creatives. So it's creatives from all over the continent, come through, let us upskill you, come and practice different things. Let's learn from industry experts. We have panel discussions, allowing also students to be able to practice different things. Let's say you are a photographer, but you've been wanting to dabble in music. We're giving you the opportunity to do that. And then we're exposing you to different parts of the creative arts. But then what we also do, we expose our students or our participants to how our students at the academy are practicing different things. So for example, we have students who have designed a fashion line, who will be presenting their stuff. We have a group of students who've wrote an original song who will be showcasing that. So it's basically come together, let's learn about the arts, let's commune, let's talk about our struggles, let's learn, but then let's also enjoy the arts, and then let's go back into the rest of the world and practice whatever it is that we are practicing.
Okay, pause it right there. You say enjoy the arts, and I want to take you to, you know, and I'd like to think of myself as a creative, okay, because just going back, not just one generation, but maybe even several generations, the arts or creativity and the term enjoyment have been synonymous also with just bumming around, you know, not just making. And it's been painful for a lot of people who've been, but I think parents are coming around to that. The world is coming around to that. There's just so much more to it. So
Yes.
let's just start with the theme.
Yes.
And tell us how this has evolved over the years.
Yes.
And how creatives are not only able to make a gainful living, but are changing the world.
Exactly. So something that I'm passionate about as well is that creatives need to understand that they can contribute to the social economic development of the continent, right? I think that we think that creatives are just in the air making beautiful things, but the arts is actually an infrastructure. And I say this in the sense that the arts is able to allow creatives to be able to tell their stories. It is a way that allows us to imagine and design our futures. And it's also a form of expression, right?
Mhm.
So if creatives are able to understand that, one, their craft, they are a business. So if you are a photographer, you are an entrepreneur, right? So you can look at this craft as a business. But number two, you also have a voice as a creative. So if we look at people like Fela Kuti, who started a huge movement in Nigeria, that was through his music, right? So the art is not just for enjoyment, to listen or whatever, but it can be used to make a social economic change in your local
I
community.
mean, Fela Kuti has just done that now, being the
Exactly.
first African to receive a Lifetime Achievement
Yes.
Award at the Grammys, which is a huge thing. That I mean, it's crazy that music, all of those creative beauties, actually are rooted in Africa, and yet the first time we've been patted on the back for like, well done. But anyway, going back to the theme, Sankofa. Sankofa, symbolic bird, which
Yes.
also means a lot in terms of
Yes.
social, political, economic change. Let's talk about that, why you chose that as a symbol. And just also when you talk about a new genesis, what is the inflection on that for those who are attending Umuzi 2026?
Okay, so the Sankofa bird, if you go and research, it's a bird that's sort of like its neck is bending towards the back. And the whole thing is, what we're trying to do is getting our students to, one, understand that we are retrieving from the past. So we're not forgetting our past as creatives. We're not forgetting about what happened, good or the bad, but we're retrieving what we need to retrieve and then moving forward and then creating something new. So what does it mean for a creative in 2026 to get stuff from the past and then apply it, right? So basically, for everyone that's attending Umuzi, would understand that we are taking elements of the past and using it to empower us to be able to redefine what it means to be a creative from their perspective.
You know, memory work, I was and I just need to I need to look at my phone quickly just to remember the particular name that I'm looking for. But memory work is something that is not adequately understood. And not used well enough. And I say I want to go back to a message that I sent, because I was listening to a colleague whose work I love and enjoy. But anyway, Tariq McDowell, a jazz singer. He is, I discovered this guy just through listening. He is amazing. I couldn't believe he was only 26. But yes, and think, you know, Louis Armstrong.
Oh, wow.
Think... Exactly. So
Okay.
he's classic, but he's got such a new age edge to
Yes,
it. So I want to
exactly.
talk about memory work, the importance of infusing that, as you say, we're taking from the past, bringing it into the future,
Yes.
but equally celebrating them both.
Yes.
So creative work is no longer just, as you say, it's no longer on the periphery, but we're designing buildings, as in, you know, human, what do you call it? Human spaces.
Yes.
That can house all of those histories.
Yes.
And, I think you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
You're an academic, so you can articulate what I'm thinking.
Okay, so just to hear what you're saying, and you can stop me if I'm incorrect.
You're right. Just take it there.
Okay, so when we think about looking at the past, so I always have this vision, for example, in architecture, right? We know how our homes were built back in the day, right? We were in huts. Some places were in huts. Sometimes they were lower than others. Sometimes we used there were dips in the hut. The reason why the people bent was because they didn't want to get the smoke. There's different reasons, right?
Human settlements, yes.
Exactly. But unfortunately, if you look at architecture on the continent, we're not trying to modernize and adapt our architecture accordingly. There are a few architects that are able to do that, and that's what makes them prominent, and now they're designing all over the world. But my thing is, what happens if we taught our African creatives to be able to retrieve from the past, understand the essence of what it is that we were trying to do and why, and then applying that in the future? So I'm not necessarily saying we must live in huts, but what does a modern African home look like? You know, we're in winter, it's cold, our homes are built out of cement, we're freezing, right? What if we use something else that people used in the past, right? So how can we adapt how can we use what people used in the past and then adapt it according to the context that we live in? Because I think that would be extremely powerful. Even if we look at the bags, those bags that we carry the blankets in, Louis Vuitton got them and branded them, and now it's high fashion.
And that's the thing about cultural expropriation, where our people ought to be benefiting from that. So what is stopping us? Because as I'm saying about this artist that I was listening to, one of the things that he was saying, he was talking about self-expression and using music through that, and we're just talking about the roots of jazz. But one of the things he was saying is that as early as time, human beings have always seen the need to communicate with the next human being. So he was looking at cave arts, etc. So now we've got digitization. How has that aided but also impeded the creative arts space?
So I think I'm on the side of it's aided, because I'm pro technology, even AI. For me, I think a lot of creatives worry about technology and they say that it's stealing, it's overtaking the arts, right? But AI and tech cannot take our creativity. I think what it can do is enhance the creative process. So, for example, if I have students in my class and they're trying to figure out, I'm trying to make this with this and this hat here with this woman in a swimming pool and this happening here, instead of them trying to draw it out for me, what they can do, they can put a prompt and say, this is what I'm thinking of doing. Miss S, how does this look, right? And then we move from that, right? But technology, and I think creatives, especially on the continent now, I think that Africa is currently spearheading the arts globally. Everyone is looking to us. But what we shouldn't do is miss out on the opportunity of looking at how technology and AI can sort of catapult us into a way where we can tell our own stories.
I want to ask you this question because this is how you and I connected. We're in the same community. We're Gates Foundation's goalkeepers. So that's regarding SDGs. And I want to know what your SDGs are, and how the work that you're doing could help us reach those 2030 targets.
So I cover SDG 4, which is education. So I am a teacher as well. And the work that I do is basically equipping and teaching young creatives how to use their creative thinking inside the classroom and outside of the classroom. So how can you solve a problem using creative thinking? How can you use your music to advocate for something, right? So I equip my students with the tools and the skills to be able to apply their creativity outside of the classroom for a social economic change. So that's basically.
So what do you see in your future? What do you think you would like to do to change not only the current environment that we're in, but the thinking?
I would like to transform education. I'd like to change curriculum and basically teach creatives how to apply creative thinking within the African context. A lot of our creatives are not taught how to do that within the African context. We're taught how to make beautiful brands and beautiful music, but how can we use our creative thinking to solve problems? How can we use it to advocate? And then how do we do that within the context of Africa? So the goal is to build a school one day that teaches students about that.
You know, you said it's important for us to understand you, Sanyu, who you are and what you bring to the table. My final question is, you are Ugandan by birth, and you are basically now a naturalized South African. What creative thinking would you use and would you teach your students to just help us, get over this Afrophobic sentiment that we confront as a result of socio-economic hardships? How would you say, because I want to use that analogy of umuzi, we are all at home within each other.
So the way I teach it to my students is that if we look at a creative project, it can never be done by one person. A great project requires different skills, different people. So when I talk to my students, it's the same thing. You cannot do one thing alone. You cannot be great alone. You need community to be able to build something bigger than you. If you want to build something that's not bigger than you, maybe you can work alone. But you can only build something bigger than you if we work together. And that requires us to partner up with people who have different ethnicities, different languages. So that's what I teach them.
Kind of what was that saying? If you want to go fast, go alone.
Yes.
If you want to go far, go with somebody else.
Exactly.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Sanyu Sematimba is the Umuzi Youth Pan-African Creative Festival founder. It is held by the African Leadership Academy. It's in its third year. And just a quick one, what are the dates?
The 13th and 14th of February, so this weekend.
All right, so that's happening at the African Leadership Academy. It's under the theme, Sankofa, A New Genesis. Well, that's it from Africa World Hour. Up next is Shela Ndukumana with African Diaries. From us, until the next time, it's goodbye for now.
Tsepiso Makwetla winds it down on Africa World Hour, 9 to 10 p.m. Conversations that touch the heart.